Now, many skeptics claim that because there is no actual descriptive account of the resurrection taking place, that it didn't happen. Well, they're right about one thing. There is no real account of Jesus' body vibrating and him sitting up in the sheets going, "I'm alive," or anything like that. But there is an account of both him dying on the cross and appearing to people afterwards. It's a simple evaluation of cause and effect. Common sense seems to indicate that if a man was dead and then he's appearing to people afterwards, then that's a little unusual, and something may have happened there. When we study history, we don't study the actual object itself or whatever else it was. We study an event and we examine evidence from around it. When we take a look at fossils, we study fossils. We don't actually study dinosaurs themselves. Not just because we're studying fossils doesn't mean that dinosaurs never existed. We're just studying what remains of them. Plus, there are many eyewitness accounts of both Jesus dying on the cross and of him not resurrecting, but appearing later. In 1 Corinthians 9:1 and 15:8, Paul even claims that he saw Jesus the Lord himself as he appeared to Paul. Now, scholars almost universally agree that Paul was the author of these books. So wouldn't it make sense that if these are historically accurate, then Paul would be telling the truth of what he believed? You tell me.
Okay. Some skeptics doubt that there is evidence of Christ's resurrection, but there is evidence in 1 Corinthians through the Creed which Paul wrote. And some skeptics, though, would doubt that this is the actual creed of the early church. But we know it is the creed through the language that Paul uses. He uses rabbinic terms such as received and delivered, which show that he is passing along a creed. And he also uses phrases that he wouldn't normally use, such as the 12th, the third day, and he was raised, which show that he is just quoting the creed of the early church. The creed is written within 20 years of the resurrection, like between 55 and 57 AD. But Paul says that he already passed the creed along to Corinth in 51 AD. So we know that there's only a 20-year span between the resurrection and the time that Paul wrote Corinthians. This 20-year gap is small, so we know that there wasn't enough time for it to grow into a legend. And so we know that the creed cannot just be legendary and that Christ actually raised from the dead. Okay, in Mark, there is no account of the resurrection. There is no account of the resurrection in Mark. So, Mark just didn't think that it was important to include the resurrection and the accounts of it because people were still alive within that time who saw the resurrection, so it wasn't important. And he just included the part of where the tomb was empty, so you know that it shows that Christ was resurrected. And in 1 Corinthians 15:11, it says that Paul is saying the same exact thing as Peter and James, and since all the Gospels agree that Christ raised from the dead, it shows that Christ actually did raise from the dead.
Many people are skeptical about Jesus appearing to the 500. 1 Corinthians 15 is the only place in ancient literature where this is mentioned. 1 Corinthians 15:6 says, "After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time, most of whom were still living, though some had fallen asleep." Some say that this casts doubt on Paul as a reliable source because it is the only place where this claim is mentioned. However, this is not the case. This passage is one of the earliest and best authenticated passages of all. Paul says, most of whom are still living, though some has fallen asleep. This shows that Paul either knew the people or was told by someone that they were still alive and would be willing to testify that they had seen Jesus alive. Paul wouldn't include this unless that these people could confirm that. Skeptics question where this encounter would have taken place. Jesus fed the 5,000 on the Galilean countryside and would easily be able to preach to these people also on the Galilean countryside. Another question, skeptics also question why no one else has recorded this, such as Josephus. This was a local story, and local stories don't often circulate for long before they die off. Josephus wrote 60 years before the resurrection, so it is possible that Josephus either didn't know about this story or did not want to support the resurrection further. All this evidence supports that Jesus did indeed make an appearance after the resurrection.